Ambassador Thrax adjusted his ceremonial mantle, the fabric shifting across his carapace like oil on water around him. 17 species filled the council's amphitheater, their delegations arranged in descending tiers that spiraled toward the central holographic display. The air carried the blended odors of 100 different atmospheres, each carefully filtered to prevent toxicity, each still managing to offend his senses. This agenda item is a formality, Thrax announced, his voice resonating through the translator mesh. The species identifying as humanity has submitted its application for associate membership. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel exactly, more like the amusement adults feel when a child insists they can pilot a starship. Thrax allowed the moment to stretch. He had served the Voran Empire for 70 cycles, and he understood the value of theater. The humans had arrived 3 days ago in a vessel that looked like a cargo container welded to a propulsion unit. No curves, no aesthetic consideration. No visible weapon systems, just gray angles and utilitarian plating. Representative Vance, Thrax continued, gesturing toward the human delegations. Observation platform, would you care to address the council, Commander Elias? Vance stood. He was unremarkable by human standards, average height, close-cropped hair, a face that had seen decades of hard vacuum and harder decisions. His uniform fit without ornamentation. No medals, no ceremonial blades, no markings of rank beyond a small insignia. On his collar, Thrax had studied humans before this meeting. He knew their biology, fragile, limited senses, dependent on a narrow range of temperatures and atmospheric pressures. He knew their history, fragmented, violent, plagued by conflicts over resources and ideology. He knew their technology, centuries behind council standards, reliant on chemical propulsion and primitive computing. What he did not know, what no one in the galaxy knew, was that everything in the council's database about humanity was wrong. Council members, Vance began. His voice carried no translator. He spoke in his own language, and the council systems converted his words into the appropriate frequencies for each species. Humanity requests associate status. We offer trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense against external threats. Thrax's mandibles clicked in amusement. Mutual defense. Ambassador, your vessel couldn't defend itself against a single patrol frigate. More laughter. Azio's delegate shifted its mass, its gelatinous form flowing across the viewing platform. The Voran representative raises a valid point. Your technology appears underdeveloped. What could your species possibly contribute to galactic security? Vance didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply said, our ship is not a warship. Thraxer leaned forward. Then, what is it? The human paused for a fraction of a second. Something moved behind his eyes. Not fear, not anger. Calculation. It's a freighter. We converted it for this journey. Our actual military vessels are different. Different how? Different enough. The laughter died. Not because the humans had said anything threatening, but because of how they had said it, flat. Certain, the way a farmer might describe a storm coming over the horizon. Thrax exchanged glances with the other senior delegates. This was unusual. New species usually graveled or boasted or begged. Humans did none of these things. They simply stated facts and waited. Council Regulations require a deep matter scan. Of your vessel, Thrax said, standard. Procedure, no exceptions. Vance nodded, scan whatever you want. Technician Erks received the order with resigned boredom. She had performed thousands of these scans, each one confirming what everyone already knew. New species were always behind the curve, always desperate for acceptance, always hiding nothing of value. She aimed the scanning array at the human ship and initiated the sequence. First results appeared on her display. She blinked. The density readings were wrong. Deep matter analysis showed the vessel's mass at nearly 4 times what visual inspection suggested. That meant internal compartments packed with something heavy, something dense. She ran the scan again. Same result. Her fingers moved across the console, cross-referencing the ship's thermal signature. The Odysseus was generating heat equivalent to a council battle cruiser from a ship 1/10 the size, from a ship with no visible radiators. Supervisor, Urich said, her voice steady, despite the cold spreading through her thoracic cavity. You need to see this. The supervisor glanced at her display. His compound eyes widened. Run a composition scan on the whole material. Urich initiated the 3rd scan. This one took longer. Deep matter analysis required penetrating the outer layers and mapping atomic structures. The results populated slowly, line by line, element by element, carbon, iron, silicon, all expected. Then the unknown. A spectral signature that matched nothing in the Council's vast database. An element that shouldn't exist, an alloy that no known species had ever manufactured. Urich stared at the display. Her supervisor stared at the display. Sound. The alert, the supervisor whispered. Sound it now. The council chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Delegates spoke over each other, their translators struggling to keep pace with overlapping demands and accusations. Thrax raised his primary manipulator for silence, but even his authority barely cut through the noise. Ambassador Vance, Thrax said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Your vessel scan results are irregular. Explain. Vance remained standing, his hands rested at his sides, palms open. Gesture Thrax had learned meant non-aggression among humans, but the ambassador's posture held no submission. He stood like a man waiting for a question he had already answered 1,000 times. The scan results are accurate, Vance said. Your technology is reading what exists. Existing elements do not produce unknown spectral signatures. A Kelvin delegate shouted, her feathers bristled with agitation. You are either hiding something or your species has achieved metallurgical impossibilities. Vance turned to face her. Why would either option be the only possibilities? The chamber went quiet, not silent. Machines hummed, air circulators whispered, delegates shifted in their seats, but the quality of the sound changed, became watchful. Thrax felt something he had not experienced in decades, uncertainty. The humans were not acting correctly. They should be defensive or apologetic or at least nervous. Instead, this one stood before the most powerful beings in the galactic arm and asked questions that made council members feel foolish. Chief Erks, Thrax said, activating his personal communicator. Report directly. What did you find? Yours voice came through the council speakers, thin and careful. The human vessel's internal density suggests compartmentalized Storage of materials with mass to volume. Ratios we cannot replicate. The thermal output indicates power generation. Approximately 400% above theoretical maximums for a ship of that size, and the hull. She paused. In the background, alarms chirped. The hull is composed of an alloy that does not correspond to any known element or compound in the galactic database. We have tested the signature against every cataloged substance. Nothing matches. Could it be a natural material? A delegate asked. Something from their home system. Urix's answer came after a long hesitation. Natural materials do not have engineered lattice structures. This alloy was manufactured by someone by them. Thrax turned back to Vance. You will explain this alloy immediately. I will explain it when you ask the right question. The right question. Vance took a single step forward, just one, but the movement drew every eye in the chamber. You're asking about our technology. You should be asking about our history. The council's security detail shifted. 6 armed guards from various species moved closer to the human delegation's platform. Their weapons remained holstered, but their postures broadcast readiness. Thrax made a decision. I am invoking Emergency Protocol 7. The human vessel is to be surrounded and held in position until we complete a full investigation. Vance nodded. That's your right. You do not object. Would objecting change your mind? Thrax's mandibles clicked. No, then. I won't waste my breath. The human sat down. Around him, his delegation 7 other humans in identical, unadorned uniforms remained perfectly still. No whispering, no nervous glancing, no frantic communications with their vessel. They sat like people who had already considered every possible outcome and found none of them frightening. Within 12 minutes, 12 council patrol vessels had taken positions around the Adius. The human freighter didn't power up weapons, didn't adjust its trajectory, didn't even transmit a query. It just floated there, gray, silent, waiting on the council's command deck. Thrax watched the tactical display. The human ship's icon sat at the center of a web of targeting solutions and weapons locks. Any other vessel would have surrendered by now, or run, or at least broadcast a protest. The Adius did nothing. Begin a full electromagnetic analysis. Thrax ordered. I want to know every frequency there, transmitting every signal there, receiving every heat fluctuation in their power core. The analysis took 43 minutes. The results made Thrax wish he had never ordered it. The human ship was not transmitting at all. It had not attempted to contact anyone since the council vessels arrived, but it was receiving, pulling in a constant stream of data from somewhere outside the star system, from somewhere deep in the void between galactic arms, from a source that was transmitting with enough power to vaporize a small moon. Thrax stared at the numbers. Where is that signal coming from? Yours voice barely reached a whisper. We don't know. It's everywhere, like space itself is broadcasting, like something out there is listening to everything we say. Can they hear us right now? Silence. Then Urix's answer. Sir, I think they've been listening for a very long time. Thrax looked at the tactical display, at the gray ship, at the impossible signal radiating from the darkness between stars. He thought about the human ambassador's calm voice, about the flat certainty in those eyes, about the question Vance had asked. You should be asking about our history. Get me Commander Vance on a private channel. Thrax said, "No council oversight, no. Recording just his voice and mine." Channel opened. Thrax waited. Vance's voice came through, still calm, still unhurried. "Ambassador Thrax, you finally asked what? The right question. Pause. You want to know what the al is? You want to know about the power source? You want to know why we're not afraid?" Yes. Vance exhaled a sound that might have been a sigh on a less controlled species. The alloy is called war steel. We developed it during the Sol conflict. About 400 years ago. It's not an element, it's a forced lattice of collapsed matter. Every square centimeter holds the density of a mountain. Thrax's breathing stopped. That's impossible. So we've been told, and the power source. Vance's next words carve themselves into Thrax's memory. We learn to capture singularities, micro black holes. We feed them matter, harvest the radiation, convert it to usable energy. Every human ship carries a captive star in its belly, even the Freyers. Thrax gripped the edge of his console. His claws left gouges in the metal. Why would you put that technology on a freighter? Why would we put it anywhere else? Vance's voice carried no malice, just explanation. Ambassador, you asked what we contribute to galactic security. The answer is nothing, because we don't contribute to security. Then what do you contribute to? Vance's next words froze the blood in Thrax's veins. We contribute to extinction. The private channel hummed with silence. Thrax's translator registered Vance's words, processed them, converted them into meaning. Extinction. The human had not said defense, had not said deterrence, had not said victory. Extinction. You're threatening us, Thrax said. His voice held steady, but his secondary heart had begun racing, a stress response he had not experienced since his youth. No, Vance's response came too quickly to be a lie. If I were threatening you, you'd know. I'm explaining. You asked for an explanation. Explain extinction. Not here, not on this channel. A pause. Your security teams are recording everything we say. They're good. They caught the signal from outside the galaxy, but they're not good enough to understand what they're hearing. Thrax wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but the human's confidence unsettled him more than any weapon could. Confidence, this absolute, came from only one place: certainty of outcome. What do you propose? Send one of your people to the Adius. Not a soldier, not a politician, a scientist, someone who can understand what we show them, someone who can explain it to the council in terms you'll believe. And if I refuse, then you'll vote on our application. Without knowing the truth, you'll reject us, will leave, and in 50 years, when the next species knocks on your door, asking for protection from something in the dark, you'll wonder if humans could have helped. Thrax's primary heart joined the secondary in accelerated rhythm. What's something? The channel went quiet, so quiet that Thrax could hear his own circulatory system working, could hear the faint hum of the council ship's environmental controls, could hear, or imagined he could hear, the impossible signal still pouring in from the void. Ambassador Vance finally said, "We didn't come here to join your council, we came here to warn you." The channel closed. Thrax sat in the silence, surrounded by 1,000 displays and 100 analysts, and felt utterly alone. He made his choice. Technician received the assignment with numb acceptance. She was a scientist, a specialist in deep matter Analysis, not a diplomat and certainly not a soldier, but Ambassador Thrax had made his reasoning clear. Yurex had seen the scan results. She understood what the numbers meant. She would recognize truth when she heard it. The shuttle ride to the 80s took 11 minutes. Yurex spent them reviewing the scan data again and again, hopping to find an error, a calibration mistake, anything that would make the impossible numbers retreat into possibility. They didn't. The human ship grew larger. In her viewport, up close it looked even more primitive. Welding seams visible along the hull, scorch marks from atmospheric entry, patches of mismatched plating that suggested repairs made with whatever materials were available, but the scans didn't lie under that crude exterior. Something waited, something with the mass of a small moon compressed into a volume the size of a cargo depot. The shuttle docked, the airlock cycled. Yurex stepped through and into a corridor that looked exactly as unremarkable as the exterior. Gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling. Standard lighting, standard temperature. Nothing special. Commander Vance waited for her alone. No guards, no weapons. Just the human in his plain uniform, standing with his hands at his sides. Technician Yurex, he said, thank you for coming. Your ship scares me, she replied. Honesty seemed the only strategy left. It should. Vance turned and walked down the corridor. Follow me. I'll show you why. He led her through the ship's interior, past crew quarters, past a mess hall, past what looked like a medical bay. Everything functional, everything basic, everything designed to hide what lay beneath. They stopped at a reinforced door marked with symbols Yurex didn't recognize. Vance placed his palm against a scanner. The door opened. Beyond it the ship changed. The corridor widened into a chamber that stretched farther than the ship's exterior dimension should allow. Yurex's spatial awareness screamed in protest. The numbers didn't work. The geometry didn't work. But her eyes showed her a room at least 3 times larger than the ship's total volume. Compressed space, Vance said, watching her reaction. We learned to fold the fabric of reality. Every human ship has interior volume approximately 12 times its exterior appearance. Yurex's legs felt weak. That's God technology. No, Vance shook his head. It's survival technology. We didn't develop it because we wanted to. We developed it because we had to. At the center of the impossible chamber, a cylinder of dark metal rose. From floor to ceiling, it pulsed with light in patterns that hurt Yurex's eyes, frequencies her visual cortex couldn't quite process. What is that? Our history. Vance approached the cylinder and placed his hand on its surface. Every war, every atrocity, every weapon we ever built. It's all in here. Every lesson learned in blood, every reason we became what we are. The cylinder's surface rippled. Images formed not on a screen but directly in Yurex's mind. She saw 2 human armies facing each other across a field of mud, saw explosions rising over cities, saw ships burning in the blackness between worlds, saw something else, something in the dark, something watching. What is that? She whispered. That's what we found when we reached for the stars. Vance's voice hardened. Not friends, not allies, predators, things that had been hunting for so long they forgot prey could fight back. The image shifted. Yurex saw human ships, real warships, not freighters, moving through space with impossible speed. Saw weapons firing that didn't explode so much as a Race saw something massive, something ancient, something that had fed on civilizations for 1 billion years. Saw it die. We didn't just survive. Vance said, we won every time because we learned something that no other species in the galaxy understands. What? Vance turned to face her. For the first time, Urich saw past his calm mask too. Whatever lived beneath, and what she saw made her stumble backward. Extinction isn't a threat, the human said. It's a promise, and humans are very, very good at keeping promises. The cylinder pulsed brighter. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the chambers' walls something moved, something that had been waiting. Yuri stumbled through the Odysseus corridors, her mind struggling to process what she had seen. The cylinder, the images, the presence. In the darkness beyond the compressed space chamber, Commander Vance walked beside her, matching her pace, neither rushing nor dragging. Your people, Urix managed. You said you found things in the dark, predators. Yes, how many? Vance's expression didn't change. 73 distinct species level threats since we left our solar system. 62 of them are extinct. The remaining 11 are contained. Contained how? However necessary. They reached the airlock. Urix paused before entering the shuttle. Something the human had said earlier clawed at her. Attention, you said you didn't come to join the council. You came to warn us. Warn us about what? Vance activated the airlock controls. The inner door cycled open. About what's coming, about why we need you to accept our application. If you're so powerful, why do you need us? The human's eyes met hers. For the first time, Urich saw something other than calculation in those dark irises. She saw exhaustion, the deep bone weariness of someone who had carried a weight too long. Because we're tired, Vance said, because every time we fight alone we lose people, because we've been fighting for 400 years and we don't want to fight anymore, but we will, we always will. He stepped back. Go to the council what you saw, tell them everything, and then tell them this. Adius is one of 300 such siege ships we've scattered across the galaxy. If this council attacks us, the other 299 will activate. If you try to contain us, they will activate. If you so much as delay our application beyond the 24 hours I'm about to request, they will activate. What happens when they activate? Vance's answer came as the airlock door closed between them. They finish what we started. The shuttle ride back to the council station took 11 minutes. Urich spent them shaking. The council reconvened in emergency session. Every delegate present, every security force on high alert. Thrax sat at the center of the spiral, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the human delegation's empty platform. Vance had not returned. He had sent a message instead. 24 hours starting now. Urich stood before the council and told them everything. The compressed space, the captive singularities, the worst Steel Hall, the 73 threats, the 62 extinctions. She left nothing out. When she finished, silence dominated the chamber, not the watchful quiet from earlier. This was the silence of species trying to process information their brains rejected as impossible. This is absurd, a delegate finally said. One species cannot have faced that many existential threats and survived. The probability is probability doesn't matter to humans. Thrax interrupted. His voice carried none of its earlier condescension. I've been reviewing their History since this began, did you know? They nearly destroyed themselves 3 times, 3 separate global wars that could have ended their species, and each time they came back stronger. He activated the central display. Images of Earth appeared, beautiful blue, utterly ordinary. They call it a death world. Thrax continued, not because it's particularly dangerous by galactic standards, it's not, but because they made it dangerous. They weaponized their own planet. They turned their atmosphere into a weapon. Their oceans, their weather. What are you saying? The Kelvin delegate demanded. Thrax turned to face the council. I'm saying we made a mistake. We looked at their ship and saw primitive technology. We looked at their history and saw chaos. We looked at their biology and saw weakness. We were wrong about everything. He tapped his console. The display shifted to show the signal Eurex had detected, the impossible broadcast pouring in from the void between galactic arms. That signal isn't coming from outside the galaxy, Thrax said. It's coming from outside reality. Humans have learned to communicate across dimensional barriers. They've learned to listen to places that don't exist yet, and they've learned something that terrifies me more than their weapons. The council leaned forward as one. They've learned what's coming, Thrax whispered. Something worse than they predators they've already killed. Something that makes their 73 threats look like children's nightmares, and they came here not to join us, not to rule us, but to warn us. The Kelvin delegate stood. If this is true, and I'm not convinced it is, then our course is clear. We must destroy the human ship before it can activate its network. We must contain this threat before it spreads. And if the human is telling the truth, Azios's delegate rumbled, if destroying this ship triggers the others, then we fight. You will lose. Everyone turned. Azios' elder had risen from the delegation's platform, snorts being so ancient that its mass had settled into rippling folds that barely moved. The elder's name was lost to time. Most species simply called it the memory. You have sat in this council for 40,000 cycles, the memory said, addressing the entire assembly. You have seen species rise and fall. You have fought wars and signed treaties. You have believed yourselves powerful. The elder's form shifted, and when it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of ages. I was here when we first detected Earth 5,000 cycles ago. A primitive world, violent inhabitants, nothing special. We classified them as a class 0 threat and moved on. A class 0 means harmless, the Kelvin delegate said. Yes, the memory paused. That is what we told the council. That is what we recorded in the database, but that is not what we meant. Thrax leaned forward. What did you mean? The memory's form contracted, a gesture of shame among the Zios. Class 0 was our designation for species that posed an existential threat, species that could not be fought, species that could only be avoided. We had 7 such classifications in our history. 6 of them belonged to predators that humans later exterminated. And the 7th, the Ellers's voice dropped to a frequency that barely registered on the council's translators. The 7th was humanity. We classified them as class 0 because our projections showed that engaging them would lead to our extinction, not defeat. Extinction, complete eraser, every Zios, everywhere, forever. Then why didn't you destroy them when you had the chance? Thrax demanded. The memory's answer froze the chamber because our projections showed that attacking them would also lead to our extinction. There was no winning move. There never was, so we watched, we waited, and we prayed. They never learned we were here. The Elder turned its mass toward the empty human delegation platform. Now they know. They've always known. They've been listening to us for centuries, and they've been patient, more patient than any predator has a right to be. The 24 hours, the Kelvin delegate whispered. They're not giving us time to decide. They're giving us time to realize we have no choice. Vance's voice filled the chamber from every speaker at once. Correct, the council erupted. Delegates shouted, security forces scrambled. Alarms blared, but the human's voice cut through everything, calm, steady. Absolute, you have 23 hours and 41 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely. The transmission ended. Council descended into chaos, but the memory remained still, watching, waiting, and remembering what it had seen 5,000 years ago when the first human ships had left their solar system and looked out at the stars. The humans had not looked curious, they had not looked hopeful, they had looked hungry. And that was when the Zios had known the galaxy would never be the same. 14 hours into the deadline, the Voran Empire made its move. Thrax had argued against it, had pleaded, threatened, even physically blocked the transmission of the attack order, but the Voran military answered to the War Council, not to diplomats. And the War Council had decided, better to strike first than to wait for an unknown threat to manifest. 3 Vorthan destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the Adius, their weapons charged, their targeting computers locked, their crews prepared for an easy kill. On the council station, Urix watched the tactical display with sick dread. They're going to fire. Thrax said nothing. He had exhausted his influence. All he could do was watch. The destroyers reached firing range. Their commander, a veteran of 14 campaigns, sent a final demand. Surrender or be destroyed. The Adius did not respond. Fire, the commander ordered. 3 energy beams crossed the void and struck the human ship. They hit the hull, the impossible alloy, the war steel, the compressed matter that shouldn't exist, and did nothing. Beams scattered, diffused, absorbed. The Odysseus didn't even rock from the impact. Again the commander ordered. His voice had lost its confidence. The destroyers fired again and again and again. Human ship remained untouched. Then the Adius moved, not fast, not aggressive, just repositioned. It slid sideways with no visible propulsion, no maneuvering thrusters, no heat signature. It simply changed its location in space, as if reality had been edited. The Voran commander ordered a full barrage. Every weapon, every missile, every energy cannon fired simultaneously. The Odysseus opened its cargo bay. What emerged looked like a child's toy, a drone no larger than a shuttle, shaped like a flattened disc with no visible weapons or armor. It drifted toward the Voran destroyers with casual slowness. The destroyers targeted it, fired, missed, fired again, missed again. The drone accelerated. Urix's sensors couldn't track it. One moment it was drifting, the next it was everywhere at once, weaving between energy beams and missile salvos as if the weapons were standing still. It reached the lead destroyer and stopped, hovered, did nothing. The destroyer's crew held their breath. The drone transmitted not a weapon, not an attack, a data packet, a video file, a message, and every species on the council received it. Simultaneously, Urix opened the file. Her mind refused to process what she saw. The video showed Earth not the blue-green paradise of the Council's database, but something else, a world transformed, orbital platforms the size of cities, shipyards, that stretch from the surface to the edge of space, weapons, so many weapons, thousands of them, millions array in formations that blotted out the stars. The camera moved closer, past the weapons, past the shipyards, past the orbital platforms, down to the surface, to a museum. Glass cases lined the walls. Each case held a weapon, primitive by galactic standards, but Yor recognized them from her earlier vision. Swords, guns, bombs, things that delivered poison, things that spread fire, things that shattered minds. And at the center of the museum, one case stood alone, larger than the others. Older, the label beneath it read, "First weapon carved from stone, circa 2,600,000 years before space travel." A narrator's voice, Vance's voice, spoke over the images. "You're looking at 2,000,000 years of continuous weapons development, every generation built something deadlier, every generation used it, every generation survived." The video shifted. Now it showed schematics, blueprints for weapons that made URX's visual cortex ache. Weapons that manipulated gravity, weapons that rewrote atomic structures, weapons that erased targets from causality itself. "We didn't stop at physical weapons," Vance continued. "We learned to weaponize economics, information, time. We learned to make enemies defeat themselves without firing a single shot. We learned to break civilizations so completely that their survivors thanked us for the privilege." The schematics faded. A single image remained, a human face, ancient, wrinkled, eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "The first weapon took 2,000,000 years to create," the old human said. "The second took 10,000. The third took 500. The fourth took 50. The fifth took 1. We are now at the point where we can develop a new weapon during the time it takes you to read this sentence. And we are developing them constantly, always, without end." The old human smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You cannot beat us. You cannot contain us. You cannot even understand us. Because you look at war as a tragedy. We look at war as a problem to be solved. And we have been solving problems for 2,000,000 years." The video ended on the tactical display. The Voron destroyers had stopped firing. Their crews stared at their screens, at the drone still hovering among them, at the impossible ship that had sent it. "What do we do?" The Voron commander whispered over an open channel. Commander Vance's voice answered, "Go home, tell your war council what you saw, tell them the next shot fired at a human vessel will be the last shot fired by the Voron Empire." The destroyers retreated. The drone returned to the Adius. The cargo bay closed, and the council sat in stunned silence, realizing that everything they thought they knew about power had just been rendered obsolete. 19 hours into the deadline, the council fractured. Not metaphorically, literally. Delegations withdrew to private chambers, alliances fractured along old wounds and new fears. Species that had stood together for centuries began arguing about which of them had provoked humanity, which of them could negotiate with humanity, which of them would survive if humanity decided to stop negotiating. Thrax watched it all from the central platform, feeling the weight of every decision he had ever made pressing down on his carapace. He had started this. His mockery, his dismissal, his certainty that humans were nothing special. Now he knew the truth. Humans were not special, they were worse than special, they were inevitable. The Zio's elder, the memory, drifted to his side. You blame yourself. Yes, good, blame is useful. It means you won't make the same mistake again. Ellers's mask shifted, and something that might have been an eye turned toward Thrax. But blame is not enough. You must decide, will you fight or will you accept? Those are the only options. The third option, running, does not exist. Humanity has siege ships across the galaxy. There is nowhere to run. Thrax watched the chaos around him. Delegates shouting, guards posturing, politicians lying. What would you do? The memory was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice carried no ancient wisdom, only exhaustion. I would listen, I would learn, and I would pray that humanity's patience is not infinite. The council reconvened after 22 hours, not because they had reached consensus, because the deadline was approaching and no one wanted to face the humans without a unified response. The Kelvin delegates stood first. We have discussed, we have debated, we have reached a decision. Thrax waited. We will accept humanity's application, but not as associates, not as equals. The delegate's feathers flattened against her body, a sign of aggression. We will accept them as subjects. They will disarm. They will submit to council oversight. They will. The chambers lights flickered, not a malfunction, not a power surge, a response. Vance's voice came through every speaker again, but this time it was not calm. This time it carried an edge that made every being in the chamber freeze. Subject to the Kelvin delegate opened her mouth. No sound came out. Let me be perfectly clear, Vance continued. Humanity has not spent 2 million years climbing out of the mud to kneel before anyone. We did not kill gods to serve accountants. We did not break reality to ask permission. The lights flickered again. This time the flicker spread not just in the council chamber, but throughout the station, throughout the fleet, throughout every ship in the system. You have 20 minutes, Vance said. In 20 minutes the Adius will broadcast our final offer. Accept it and humanity will stand beside you against what is coming. Refuse it and humanity will stand alone, and so will you. The transmission ended. The light stabilized, but the fear did not. The Kelvin delegate collapsed into her seat. Other delegates whispered frantically. The Zios remained still, watching, waiting. 20 minutes passed. The Odysseus broadcast, not to the council, to everyone, every species, every system, every ship within range of its impossible transmitter. The message was simple, a single image, a single sentence. The image showed a human hand open, palm forward, not threatening, not pleading, just present. The sentence read, "We are not your enemies, but we will be if you force us." Below that, in smaller text, a list. 14 items, 14 demands. Demand 1, full council membership with equal voting rights. Demand 2, no restrictions on human technology or military development. Demand 3, access to all council scientific and historical records. Demand 4, the right to establish human colonies within council space. The demands continued, each one reasonable by itself, terrifying in aggregate, because together they added up to one thing: humanity would not be controlled Could not be contained, would not be. Subordinate. The final demand read, humanity will not fight your wars, but if you attack us, we will end you, not defeat you, not conquer you, end you completely. Permanently, no survivors, no memory, no trace. This is not a threat, this is a promise. The council sat in silence. Then the Zio's elder rose, its mass shifted, folded, contracted into a shape that approximated a bow. I vote yes, the memory said. The Kelvin delegate stared. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious. I have watched species make this mistake for 40,000 cycles. I have watched them choose pride over survival. I have watched them die. The elder straightened. I will not watch humanity die, and I will not watch them kill us when we refuse to see reason. One by one, the delegates voted, some for acceptance, some against, some abstained. When the count finished, the result was clear. Humanity would be admitted not as subjects, not as associates, as equals, but Thrax couldn't celebrate because Vance's final words echoed in his mind. We are not your enemies, but we will be if you force us. And Thrax realized something that made his blood run cold. The humans had never wanted this. They had never wanted membership or power or respect. They had wanted something else entirely. Something they hadn't asked for. Something they hadn't demanded. They wanted the council to know fear, real fear, the kind of fear that changes how a species thinks, the kind of fear that prepares them for what's coming, because now when Vance told them about the threat in the darkness, they would listen. They would have no choice. The ceremony lasted 3 hours. Delegates spoke, treaties were signed, promises were made. Humans and aliens stood together on platforms designed for diplomacy, and the galaxy pretended that everything had changed for the better. Commander Vance stood through all of it. He shook the appropriate appendages. He smiled the appropriate smiles. He said the appropriate words, but his eyes never stopped watching the darkness beyond the station's viewports. After the ceremony, Thrax found him alone in an observation lounge. The human stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the stars. You won, Thrax said. Why don't you look happy? Vance didn't turn because winning isn't the same as being right. And I'm not sure we were right to come here. Then why did you? Because the alternative was worse. Thrax moved to stand beside the human. Together they looked out at the void, the same void that had terrified him since Uriks first detected the impossible signal. Tell me about what's coming. Vance was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried no drama, no fear, just fact. We call it the silence, not because it's quiet, because it's what's left when it passes. Stars go dark. Worlds go cold. Species stop. How do you know about it? Because we've seen it before, not directly, through the dimensional barriers, through the cracks. In reality, we learned to make. Vance finally turned. His face looked older than it had 3 days ago. It's not a species, not an empire. It's a process, a natural phenomenon that consumes everything in its path, like a fire burning through a forest, except the forest doesn't grow back. Thraxra's heart stuttered. When 200 years, maybe less. Our projections aren't precise. 200 years is not enough time. Vance's eyes met his. We've been preparing for 400. It's still not enough. That's why we came. That's why we showed you our weapons, our history, our willingness to do terrible things. He looked back at the stars. We need you to be afraid. Because fear is the only thing that will make you prepare fast enough. You could have just told us. No, Vance shook his head. You would have dismissed us. You would have delayed. You would have formed committees and held debates and waited until it was too late. You had to see, had to feel, had to understand what humanity is capable of, because if you don't match our commitment, you won't survive. Thrax thought about the video, the weapons, the museum, the old human smile. How do you do it? How do you keep fighting when you know what's coming? Vance's answer came without hesitation. Because stopping isn't an option. Because surrender is death. Because every human who ever lived passed something to the next generation, a skill, a memory, a scar, and we refuse to be the generation that drops the chain. He stepped away from the window. The council has its vote, humanity has its membership, but none of that matters if we don't prepare. So here's my real offer, the one I couldn't make publicly. Thrax waited. Humanity will share its weapons, its technology, its methods. We will train your military. We will upgrade your ships. We will show you how to build war steel and captive singularities and compressed space chambers. Vance paused. But you have to give us something in return. What? Your best, not your second best. Not your political best, your real best. The scientists who think differently. The soldiers who refuse to quit. The leaders who would rather die than surrender. We need people who understand that survival isn't guaranteed, it's earned. Thrax extended his primary manipulator. You have them. Vance shook it. The human's grip was firm, warm, alive. Then let's get to work. They stood in the observation lounge for another hour, planning, discussing, arguing. By the time Thrax left, he had a list of names, candidates for a joint human-alien task force that would begin preparing for the silence. But as he walked through the council station's corridors, past delegates celebrating their new alliance, past guards relaxing their vigilance, past politicians already positioning for advantage, Thrax felt a cold certainty settling into his bones. The preparations wouldn't be enough. 200 years wasn't enough. Even with human weapons and human methods and human determination, it wouldn't be enough. Because the silence wasn't just coming for the galaxy, it was coming for everything. And when it arrived, all the weapons in creation wouldn't matter unless humanity had one thing they hadn't shown yet, one thing they hadn't demonstrated, one thing they hadn't even mentioned. Thrax stopped walking. What had they hidden? He turned and ran back to the observation lounge. Vance was still there, still staring at the stars. What aren't you telling me? Thrax demanded. Vance didn't turn. Many things about the silence, about your preparations, about what you're really doing out here. Thrax moved to stand in front of the human, the weapons, the siege ship, the threats. It's all distraction, isn't it? You're not preparing to fight the silence. You're preparing for something else. Vance's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a tension that hadn't been there before. You're perceptive, the human said. I underestimated you. Answer the question. Vance looked past Thrax through the viewport at the stars. When he spoke, his voice barely carried. The silence isn't coming here, it's already here. It's been here for millions of years. It's what's been hunting species since before the council existed. It's what we've been fighting, what we've been killing, what we've been containing. Thrax's legs gave out. He caught himself. On a chair. You said you killed 62. Threats we did. They were projections. Fragments, pieces of the silence that broke off and became independent. We killed the pieces. We never killed the whole. Then what is the whole? Vance's eyes met his, and for the first time, Thrax saw what lay beneath the humans. Calm mask, not exhaustion, not determination. Desperation. The whole is awake now, Vance whispered. And it's coming for us, all of us, every species, every world, every star. Because we made the mistake of killing its children, and it wants revenge. The observation lounge's lights flickered somewhere in the darkness. Beyond the viewport, something moved. The council convened in emergency session before the hour ended. No ceremonies, no formalities, just raw fear and desperate questions. Vance stood before them, not on the human delegation's platform, but at the center of the amphitheater, where only the most honored or most dangerous beings ever stood. You want the truth, he said. I'll give it to you, but you won't like it. Give it anyway, Thrax said. Vance activated the central display. An image appeared. Not a photograph, not a schematic, but a theoretical model, a shape that hurt to look at, angles that didn't connect, volumes that contained more than space. Aloud, this is the silence. We don't know what it looks like because it doesn't have a fixed form. It's not made of matter or energy as we understand them. It's an absence, a hole in reality that wants to grow. The image shifted. Now it showed a timeline, millions of years compressed into a single line. Red markers dotted the line at irregular intervals. Every red marker is a mass extinction event in this galaxy. Every time a dozen species vanished simultaneously. Every time the council had to reorganize because too many members had simply stopped existing. The memories form contracted. We thought those events were natural disasters. They weren't. They were feedings. Silence wakes every 50,000 years, consumes everything it can reach, and goes back to sleep, snorts. But this time is different. This time something woke it early. Vance looked at the delegates, at the guards, at the politicians and scientists and soldiers who had come to witness history. We woke it, our dimensional experiments, our weapon development, our constant, relentless pushing against the boundaries of reality. We cracked something we shouldn't have cracked, and now the silence is awake, and it's angry, and it's coming for everything we love. Kelvin delegate stood. Her feathers had lost their color, a sign of extreme stress. Then we fight with your weapons, your methods, your determination. We will, Vance said, but fighting isn't enough. The silence can't be killed with weapons. It can't be contained with barriers. It can't be reasoned with or negotiated with or scared away. Then how do we stop it? Vance was silent for a long moment. The council waited. The station hummed. Somewhere a clock ticked toward an unknown deadline. We don't, Vance finally said. We can't stop it, but we can survive it if we're willing to do what's necessary. And what is necessary? The human's answer carved itself into every being's memory. We become like it. Not evil, not destructive, but different. We abandon our individuality, our attachment to physical form, our reliance on space and time as fixed frameworks. We become something the silence can't consume because we're no longer prey. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The memory's form trembled. You're talking about evolution, the elder said. Forced evolution on a galactic scale. Yes, that's impossible. No, Vance shook his head. It's inevitable. It's what every prey species eventually becomes if it survives long enough. We're just the first ones to reach that point, the first ones to understand what's required. He raised his hand, the same hand from the broadcast, open palm forward. The seed ships aren't weapons, they're arcs. Each one carries the genetic and cultural data of humanity. Each one can rebuild our civilization anywhere in the galaxy. Each one is a backup plan in case we fail, and if you succeed, Thrax asked, then we don't need the backups. We evolve, we transcend, we become something that can face the silence and win. The council descended into arguments. Some species refused to consider forced evolution. Others demanded more information. A few, the ones who had seen the most, suffered the most, feared the most, immediately volunteered. Vance let them argue. He had expected this, planned for it, counted on it. Because argument meant engagement. Engagement meant preparation. Preparation meant survival. He stepped back from the central platform and found Thrax waiting for him. You knew this would happen, the Voran said. Arguments, the fear, the desperate search for alternatives. I knew, and you let it happen anyway. Fear is useful, Vance said, echoing the memory's words from hours earlier. Blame is useful, but hope is more useful, and right now they need hope more than anything. Can you give it to them? Vance looked at the arguing delegates, at the flashing displays, at the stars beyond the viewport, stars that would soon face a threat unlike anything they had ever known. Yes, he said, but not the way they expect. He walked back to the central platform. The delegates fell silent. I'm going to tell you a story, Vance announced. A story about a species that should have died 1,000,000 times, a species that faced extinction again and again and again, a species that never gave up, never surrendered, never stopped fighting. He paused. That species is humanity, and the reason we survived, the only reason, is because we learned to work together, not as individuals, not as nations, not even as a species, but as a single unified consciousness that valued survival above everything else. The delegates stared. You think we're powerful because of our weapons? We're not. You think we're dangerous because of our history? We're not. You think we're terrifying because of what we've done? We're not. Vance spread his arms. We're powerful because we learned to love each other. Not in the abstract, not in the political sense, but really, truly, deeply love each other. Every human, every life, every sacrifice. We learned that the only thing worth fighting for is each other. And that made us unbeatable. He looked at Thra, at the memory, at every delegate in the chamber. That's what we're offering you. Not weapons, not technology, not membership in some political alliance. A family, a real family, one that will stand beside you against anything, the silence, the darkness, the end of everything, because that's what families do. The chamber was silent, not the silence of fear, the silence of understanding. You're asking us to change, the Kelvin delegate whispered. Yes, to become like you. In some ways, in the ways that matter. The delegate looked at her colleagues, at her allies, at her enemies, and for the first time in her long life, she saw them not as political opponents, but as potential family. I vote yes, she said. The other delegates followed one by one, species by species. until the vote was unanimous. Humanity had its family, the council had its hope, and somewhere in the darkness, between stars, the silence turned its attention toward a new sound, the sound of a galaxy uniting, the sound of prey becoming something else, the sound of evolution, acceleration, transformation, the sound of a family preparing to fight for its future. Commander Vance stood at the observation lounge window one last time. Thrax stood beside him. Will it be enough? The Vorin asked. Vance watched the stars, watched the darkness between them, watched the future rushing toward them like a wave that would either destroy them or carry them to new shores. I don't know, he admitted, but we're going to find out together. The Adius powered its engines, the council fleet formed up around it, and humanity, strange, terrifying, beautiful humanity, led its new family into the unknown. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, as survivors. Because that's what humans had always been, that's what they would always be. And now, for the first time in galactic history, they wouldn't be alone. The stars waited, the silence waited, and somewhere in the depth of space and time and reality itself, something that had been sleeping for millions of years opened its eyes and saw for the first time something that frightened it. Not weapons, not power, not rage, a family, and families, the silence belatedly realized, were far more dangerous than any army, because armies could be defeated, but families fought until there was nothing left. And humans have been fighting for 2 million years. They weren't about to stop now. The